The galaxy was vast, filled with countless stars, ancient civilizations and empires that had risen and fallen over thousands of years. Among them stood the Zorath Dominion, one of the most powerful empires of the age. They were proud, mighty, and feared by their neighbors. Their fleets stretched across hundreds of systems. Their armies numbered in the billions, and their technology was advanced enough to bend weaker races into obedience. To the Zorath, strength was everything. Power was their law, and weakness was something to be exploited. They had crushed dozens of species, enslaved others, and destroyed those who resisted too strongly. For centuries, no one had challenged them directly. The Dominion believed itself untouchable. But now a new species had entered the galactic stage, humans. At first, the Zorath barely noticed them. Humanity came from a small blue world on the edge of an unimportant spiral arm. Their first colony ship seemed fragile compared to the mighty dreadnoughts of the Dominion. Their fleets were small, their empire tiny, and their influence almost invisible. To the Dominion Council, humans were nothing but a curiosity. And yet, as decades passed, reports began to arrive. Reports of expansion. Another human colony, scoffed High Lord Terath during a council session. His voice echoed through the marble hall filled with delegates and advisors. These creatures spread like insects. Already they have 10 colonies. Now 15. Now 20. Do they not understand the galaxy belongs to the Dominion? The council chamber was decorated with golden banners, each marking a conquered world. The faces of the lords glowed with pride as they discussed the newcomers. Lord Savark, commander of the Eastern Fleets, waved his claws dismissively. They terraform worlds too hostile for us. Deserts, frozen rocks, toxic swamps. What kind of people waste effort on such places? They are desperate and foolish. Another noble laughed. Their technology is copied. I hear they buy engines from the Valari, weapons from the trade guilds, even medical equipment from smugglers. They cannot invent for themselves. They are nothing. The chamber filled with chuckles. To the Zorath, humanity seemed unworthy of attention, but not everyone laughed. The voice of warning. From the side of the chamber, an old figure rose. His scales were faded, his posture bent, but his eyes still burned with sharp intelligence. This was Ambassador Varric of the Kalari, one of the Dominion's oldest allies. He was respected, but also considered cautious, even fearful, by the younger lords. He tapped his staff against the floor. The sound silenced the laughter. You make light of the humans, he said slowly. His voice was calm but carried weight. But I warn you, do not underestimate them. The council sneered. Varric, said Lord Terath with a mocking smile, you are old and see ghosts where there are none. What danger can these humans pose to the Dominion? Varric raised his staff, pointing it toward the great star map at the center of the chamber. The hologram showed human expansion like a spreading flame. Look carefully. They do not expand blindly. Each colony is chosen with care. They build supply routes, fortresses, and shipyards. They grow faster than any young race I have ever seen. And when challenged, they do not submit. They fight. Some lords frowned, but most dismissed him. Lord Savark snorted. Fight? With what fleets? With what soldiers? You worry too much, old one. We have crushed far stronger enemies than these. But Varric's eyes narrowed. You see only their ships. I see their spirit. You forget I have spoken with them. I have seen their eyes. They do not know fear as you expect. If you force them to war, they will not stop until one of us lies in ashes. The council erupted in laughter once more. To them, the idea of humans being a threat was absurd. The Dominion's pride outside the chamber. The Dominion prepared for its next conquest. Fleets were built, armies trained, and weapons forged. The Empire had grown complacent in its dominance. In the academies, young officers were taught that no race could match the Dominion's strength. In the streets of the capital, propaganda celebrated past victories, showing enslaved aliens bowing before Zorath banners. Pride filled their culture like air fills lungs, and in that pride lay the seed of their downfall. For while the Dominion looked down on humanity, the humans themselves worked tirelessly. On the harsh deserts of Mars, they built cities beneath domes. On the frozen world of Europa, they mined ice for water and fuel. On distant colonies, they turned barren rock into green fields. Every challenge they faced, they solved with stubborn determination. The Zorath mocked their struggle, but the humans thrived on it. The whisper of war soon. Dominion scouts brought troubling news. A fleet of human warships had been seen patrolling near a disputed border. Their designs were strange, smaller than Dominion cruisers, yet faster and armed with weapons that seemed crude but effective. "Are they preparing for war?" asked Lord Tirath during another council meeting. "Perhaps they only defend their colonies," another suggested. But pride would not allow the Dominion to believe humans could be equals, let alone rivals. "They forget their place," snarled Lord Savark. "The galaxy is ours. If they continue to spread, soon they will touch our borders." "That cannot be allowed," the council agreed. Plans were drawn. Fleets would move to teach the humans respect. Ambassador Varric rose once more, his staff trembling in his old hands. "You fools," he said, voice rising with rare anger. "You do not see what I see. If you strike them, they will not kneel. They will rise. They will adapt, and they will come for you. Do not awaken the storm." But again, his warning was ignored. A silent threat on the frontier, human colonists received whispers of Dominion warships moving closer. Traders and explorers carried rumors. Some laughed them off, others grew uneasy. But on Earth, the leaders of humanity did not laugh. In underground bunkers and orbital command stations, human admirals studied the situation. They knew the Dominion's pride, and they knew war was coming. Quietly, they prepared. Factories worked day and night producing weapons. Engineers designed new engines and shields. Soldiers trained, not just in drills, but in simulations of real battles. And ordinary citizens supported the effort, understanding the threat to their survival. To humans, war was not a stranger. Their history was filled with it, centuries of conflict, lessons written in blood. They did not desire war, but they would not run from it. Shadows of the future. The stage was set. The Zorath Dominion, blinded by arrogance, prepared to strike down what they saw as a lesser species. The humans, silent but determined, prepared to defend themselves. Ambassador Varric, sitting alone in his chambers, wrote a final message to the Dominion Council. "You believe yourselves unbreakable, but pride blinds you. I have seen the humans. They are not conquerors, but they are survivors. If you move against them, they will not only survive, they will destroy you. Heed this warning, or your empire will burn." His words went unread. The council had already made its decision, and so the first sparks of a war that would shake the galaxy had been lit. The fleets of the Zorath Dominion moved like a wave of steel across the stars. Hundreds of warships gathered at the edge of human space, their engines glowing with power, their weapons charged and ready. To the Dominion commanders, this was not war. It was a lesson. The humans had spread too far, too fast, and now they would be reminded of their place. The first target was chosen, New Carthage, a young human colony built on a fertile world near the Dominion border. The Dominion Fleet Advance's High Commander. Savark stood at the command deck of the battleship Dominion's Claw. The chamber was wide and filled with glowing consoles, manned by officers who awaited his orders. The stars outside stretched endlessly, but his gaze was fixed on the small blue-green world ahead. "This is their pride?" he sneered. "A single colony defended by a handful of ships?" Pathetic, an officer bowed. "Yes, High Commander. Long-range scans detect only 4 human warships in orbit. A few orbital platforms, nothing more. Shall we crush them?" Savark's teeth glimmered as he smiled. "Yes, leave no doubt. Show these humans what it means to defy the Dominion." Across the fleet, orders were relayed. Engines roared, and the ships began their descent toward New Carthage. The plan was simple. Overwhelm the defenders, occupy the colony, and broadcast the victory to all of humanity. Human defenders, but the humans were not blind. On the surface of New Carthage, alarms echoed through cities and settlements. Citizens rushed to shelters while soldiers manned defenses. Orbital command stations tracked the incoming Dominion fleet, their screens filled with red dots. On the bridge of the human cruiser Vigilant, Captain Elias Kane stood tall. His ship was smaller than the Dominion battleships, its armor thinner, its weapons fewer. But his eyes burned with determination. "Status report," he ordered. "Enemy fleet incoming," his first officer replied. "At least 60 ships. We are outnumbered 15-1. The crew exchanged uneasy glances, but Kane did not flinch. "Then we fight," he said simply. "New Carthage will not fall while we still breathe." The other human ships, Resolute, Defiance, and Arrow, formed a defensive line in orbit. They were hopelessly outnumbered, but retreat was not an option. If the colony fell, thousands would die. The first fire the Dominion fleet entered range. Energy beams lit the void. Missiles streaked across the black sky and the battle began. At first, the Dominion's confidence seemed justified. Their weapons hammered the human platforms, tearing apart defenses one by one. Explosions lit up the orbital ring, debris scattering like sparks. But then the humans struck back. The Resolute fired a barrage of missiles at close range, weaving between Dominion cruisers with reckless speed. The missiles found their mark, ripping apart a destroyer in a burst of fire. The Dominion officers stared in shock. "What madness is this?" Savark growled. "They charge us with smaller ships? Are they insane?" Yet the humans pressed on. The Arrow, a light frigate, darted beneath the belly of a massive Dominion battleship, slipping past its shields. With precise shots, it targeted weak points in the engine core. The battleship erupted in flame, breaking apart. The Dominion fleet faltered. These were not the weaklings they had expected. A desperate gamble on the Vigilant, Captain Kane knew they could not win a prolonged fight. Every second bought time for the colony to evacuate civilians into underground shelters. His orders were clear. "Hold the line no matter the cost. We're outnumbered, Captain," his first officer shouted. "I know," Kane replied calmly. His eyes hardened. "Then we make every shot count." The Defiance took heavy damage, its hull cracking under Dominion fire. But instead of retreating, its captain rammed the ship directly into a Dominion cruiser, tearing both vessels apart in a blinding explosion. The sacrifice shook the Dominion fleet. Never before had they seen enemies fight with such recklessness, such refusal to surrender. Savark slammed his clawed hand against the console. "Fools, do they not value their lives? Crush them all." But even as he raged, another of his battleships was crippled, its engines disabled by precise human torpedoes. The turning point. The Dominion's numbers still gave them the advantage. Human ships burned one by one. The Arrow was destroyed in a storm of plasma fire. The Resolute lost its engines and drifted helplessly. On the Vigilant, Kane's ship was the last standing, shields flickering, weapons failing. But his spirit did not break. "All batteries, fire!" he commanded. The Vigilant surged forward straight toward the Dominion flagship. Its guns blazed, hammering the enemy's shields. Inside the Dominion's claw, alarm screamed. Officers panicked as the human cruiser rammed into their battleship with suicidal force. The impact shook the mighty flagship, tearing through armor and disabling its weapons. Svark was thrown to the ground. His pride shattered as his flagship drifted powerless. The Dominion fleet, stunned by the loss of its leader's ship, hesitated. For the first time in centuries, fear entered their hearts. Retreat of the Dominion, the battle was not truly won. The human defenders had lost nearly everything. Their ships destroyed, their platforms shattered. But they had inflicted heavy losses on a far larger force. The Dominion fleet, shaken and leaderless, retreated. They had come expecting an easy victory. Instead, they had been bloodied, humiliated, and forced to flee. On the surface of New Carthage, survivors cheered as the enemy ships pulled back. The cost had been terrible, but the colony still stood. In the underground shelters, families embraced, tears streaming down their faces. They had been spared, for now. Shock waves across the stars. News of the battle spread quickly. Traitors, smugglers, and spies carried the tale across the galaxy. A handful of human ships had stood against a mighty Dominion fleet and forced it to retreat. Other empires listened with disbelief. Whispers spread in council chambers, in markets, in hidden outposts. The humans fought the Dominion and survived. They did not surrender. They resisted. What kind of people sacrificed their ships so willingly? The myth of human weakness began to crumble. The warning repeated on the Dominion capital. The council gathered once more. High Commander Savark, shamed but alive, reported the outcome. His words were bitter, his pride wounded. They fought like animals. They refused to retreat. They damaged my flagship. My fleet was forced to regroup. The chamber filled with disbelief and anger. The lords shouted at one another, refusing to accept that a young species had bloodied their fleets. From the corner, Ambassador Varric rose again. His voice was quiet, but it silenced the room. "I warned you," he said. "You thought them weak. But you saw what happened when you pushed them. They will fight until their last breath, and every battle will only make them stronger." His eyes glimmered with sorrow, but also with certainty. "If you continue this war, you will not defeat them. You will awaken something you cannot control, And when that happens, it is not they who will burn, it is you. But the council, blinded by pride and fury, ignored him once more. Plans were made for a larger war, the human spirit. Meanwhile, across human colonies, the Battle of New Carthage became a symbol. Songs were written, statues raised, and stories told. Children grew up hearing how a few brave ships had held the line against an empire. Humanity had not sought war. But now they knew it was inevitable, and in their hearts a fire began to burn. A fire that would not stop until their survival was secured no matter the cost. The Battle of New Carthage had ended, but its echoes spread far beyond a single colony. The news could not be contained. Smugglers whispered it in the back rooms of trade stations. Merchants carried it between star systems, and spies delivered it to rival empires. The Zorath Dominion had attacked the humans, and the humans had fought back. For centuries, no young species had ever resisted the Dominion and lived. But humanity had not only survived, they had forced the invincible empire to retreat. Dominion in disbelief on the Dominion capital, anger and shame filled the Grand Council. High Commander Savark stood before the lords, his scales dulled with humiliation. They fought with madness, he said bitterly. They rammed ships, they targeted weak points with unnatural precision. They are reckless but effective. The lords shouted at one another in disbelief. Reckless fools, one sneered. Their courage will not save them from the next fleet. Animals without discipline, another added. We will crush them when we commit our full strength. But beneath their bluster, unease lingered. Never before had a prey species bloodied them so openly. From his corner, Ambassador Varric watched silently. His old eyes studied the proud lords, and at last he spoke. You mistake what you saw. That was not madness. That was resolve. They do not fight for conquest as you do. They fight for survival. Such enemies do not break. They adapt. And every time you strike them, they will rise stronger. His words were dismissed once more, yet cracks had begun to show in the Council's pride. Humanity learns on Earth and across the colonies. The Battle of New Carthage became a lesson. Admirals replayed the recordings again and again. Every maneuver, every loss, every sacrifice was studied in detail. In a military academy in Geneva, young cadets watched the footage of the Defiance ramming a Dominion cruiser. One cadet whispered, "They gave their lives, but saved thousands." Another replied, "That is what it means to fight for survival." In shipyards on Mars, engineers designed improvements. Shields were strengthened, weapons refined, engines made faster. In training fields, soldiers drilled in new tactics, hit-and-run strikes, coordinated ambushes, unconventional warfare. Every loss became fuel. Every weakness turned into innovation. Humanity was learning, and they learned quickly. Fear among the Dominion as weeks passed. Dominion fleets clashed with human patrols along the border. Each time they expected swift victory, and each time the humans surprised them. In one skirmish, 3 human frigates ambushed a convoy, disabling 6 Dominion cruisers before vanishing into asteroid fields. In another, a single human destroyer lured a squadron into a gravity well, causing half the enemy ships to crash into each other. The Dominion commanders began to whisper among themselves. These humans, they do not fight by rules. They turn weakness into weapons. They have no fear of death. Morale weakened. Soldiers who once believed themselves invincible now looked over their shoulders, wondering if humans lurked in the shadows. The human mindset, while the Dominion struggled with disbelief. The truth of humanity's strength became clearer to outside observers. On the neutral trade world of Orvac, alien merchants gathered to discuss the growing conflict. A Shirathi trader spread his hands. "I have studied them," he said. "Their entire history is filled with conflict. Kingdoms, nations, empires, they have fought each other for thousands of years. War is not strange to them. It is part of who they are." Another alien, a timid Aslan, shivered. "But they are young. How can they resist the Dominion?" The Zirathi leaned forward. "Because they are not afraid of struggle. To them, hardship is normal, and that makes them dangerous." Whispers of this truth spread. Soon, even distant empires began to watch humanity with wary eyes. The Dominion's anger. The Dominion Council, however, refused to bow to fear. Their pride demanded revenge. "We will not be humiliated by insects," Lord Tarath roared. We will gather our fleets and burn their colonies to ashes. The lords agreed, ordering the mobilization of a massive war campaign. Shipyards rang with hammers, factories produced weapons day and night, and entire legions were conscripted. Ambassador Varric tried once more to stop them. He stood in the council chamber, leaning heavily on his staff. "You are blind," he warned. "Every fleet you send only teaches them. Every battle only hardens them. They grow in ways you cannot imagine. If you continue, you will awaken their full strength, and then your empire will not survive." But his words fell on deaf ears. Humanity's resolve on Earth. Leaders gathered in the Great Hall of the United Council. Holograms of damaged ships floated above the chamber, reminders of the price of New Carthage. Admiral Kuroda, a stern woman with silver hair, spoke firmly. "The Dominion will not stop. They will come again, stronger than before. If we wait, we will die. We must prepare for total war." Some leaders hesitated. "But our fleets are few, our colonies fragile. How can we stand against an empire?" Kuroda's gaze hardened. "We do not need to match them ship for ship. We only need to show them that every step into our space will cost them blood and fire. If they bleed enough, they will falter." The council fell silent. Then one by one voices agreed. Humanity would not bow. They would resist no matter the price. Factories were expanded, fleets constructed, alliances quietly sought. Humanity, once overlooked, was rising like a storm on the horizon. The growing fear in the Dominion ranks. Rumors spread faster than orders. Soldiers whispered about the humans. They fight like demons. They do not fear death. Every time we kill them, more appear. Even seasoned commanders felt the weight of doubt. In private, one admiral admitted to another, "I have fought many enemies, but never one that learns as fast as they do. Every battle feels like training them to defeat us." But pride kept the Dominion marching forward. Fear was silenced by threats and doubts buried under arrogance. The galaxy watches other empires. Watching from afar, began to make calculations of their own. The Valari trade guilds, who once sold weapons to humans, doubled their prices, yet secretly admired how quickly humanity modified those weapons into something deadlier. The Kalari, allies of the Dominion, debated whether to remain loyal or step away from a war that looked increasingly dangerous. Even the ancient reclusive Cerathians stirred, whispering that perhaps the age of the Dominion was coming to an end. For the first time in centuries, the balance of power in the galaxy began to shift. And at the center of it all stood humanity, still small, still fragile, but burning with a fire that none could ignore. A symbol of resistance on New Carthage, the survivors rebuilt. Statues were raised for the crews of Defiance and Vigilant. Children walked beneath them, hearing stories of sacrifice. Soldiers touched the statues before boarding new ships, swearing to carry on the fight. A phrase spread across human colonies. "We are not prey." It was simple, but it became a rallying cry. In markets and schools and training fields, the words echoed. Humanity had been tested, and they would not bow. The storm builds, the Dominion prepared to unleash its largest assault yet. Thousands of ships gathered in staging grounds, their engines lighting up the dark. Generals boasted of crushing Earth itself, of making humanity a lesson for all species. But in their pride, they did not see the danger. Human fleets, though smaller, had already begun weaving a web of traps. Wormhole generators were tested, stealth drives refined, new strategies developed. Every lesson from every battle was carved into doctrine. The storm was coming, and it was no longer the Dominion that controlled its path. Varric's final plea, Ambassador Varric, weary and burdened, sent one last message to the Dominion Council. His voice trembled, but his words were strong. "You think them fragile because they are young. You think them weak because they are few. But you do not understand. Strength is not in numbers, but in will. And theirs is stronger than yours." He leaned forward, his eyes blazing with the fire of truth. "Stop this war now, or mark my words. The humans will rise. They will learn. And when they are finished, the ashes of the Dominion will be all that remains." The council dismissed him again, but unease stirred in their hearts, and far away, in human space, the storm of defiance grew larger, louder, and more unstoppable with each passing day. The galaxy trembled as the Zorath Dominion prepared its largest campaign in centuries. Shipyards blazed with activity. building massive battleships, carriers, and destroyers. Factories ran day and night, producing weapons and armor for millions of soldiers. On countless worlds, propaganda filled the skies, promising swift victory over the defiant humans. The Dominion had been humiliated at New Carthage and in later skirmishes. To them, such shame could not stand. Their pride demanded a crushing response. And so they gathered the greatest fleet the Empire had ever seen. More than 3,000 warships, enough to darken the stars. Their target was not a colony. This time their eyes were fixed on the human homeworld itself, Earth. The Dominion's Confidence High Commander Tarath stood before the Grand Fleet in orbit above the Dominion capital. The view was breathtaking. Rows of colossal battleships, sleek destroyers, and carriers filled with fighters. The formation stretched beyond the horizon. "This is the end of their defiance," Tarath declared to his officers. "Humanity will burn, and their name will be remembered only as a warning. None may challenge the Dominion and live." The officers cheered, their voices filled with arrogance. To them, the war was already won, but in their confidence, they ignored the warnings of the old ambassador Varric. His voice had been silenced in council, dismissed as weakness. No one wanted to hear his words of caution anymore. Humanity's preparation. But while the Dominion prepared to attack, the humans were not idle. On Earth, in the underground command halls of Geneva, Admiral Kuroda studied the enemy's movements. Holograms displayed the sheer size of the incoming fleet. "They are coming with everything they have," she said. Her voice was calm, but her eyes were hard. Other admirals and generals stood with her. Captain Elias Kane, survivor of New Carthage, now promoted, leaned forward. "If they reach Earth with this force, we cannot hold them. We need to fight on our terms, not theirs." And that was humanity's strength. They did not fight as the Dominion expected. In hidden shipyards around Mars, massive carriers had been constructed in secret. On the icy moons of Jupiter, stealth destroyers waited. Across asteroid belts, trap stations armed with mines and missiles were positioned. Wormhole generators, experimental and unstable, had been prepared for a desperate gamble. Humanity had no intention of waiting for the Dominion to strike Earth directly. Instead, they planned to lure the fleet and break it apart piece by piece. The invasion begins. The Dominion fleet crossed the border of human space like a storm. Planets along the way were abandoned before they arrived, leaving only empty cities and silent defenses. "This is what they call resistance?" sneered Commander Tarath. "They run before us." But as the fleet advanced, small attacks began. Human frigates darted in and out of asteroid fields, striking from ambush before vanishing. Supply ships were destroyed. Communication relays cut. Each skirmish was small, but they slowed the massive fleet, and with each attack, Dominion soldiers felt a little more unease. "Why do they not stand and fight?" one officer muttered. "They are waiting," another whispered. The trap unfolds at last. The Dominion fleet reached the Sol system. Tarath stood proudly on the bridge of his flagship, staring at the small blue world ahead. "Earth," he said with contempt. "Burn it." But the moment the order was given, the trap was sprung. From the shadow of Saturn's rings, hidden human fleets emerged. Stealth destroyers launched torpedoes, tearing through the Dominion's supply ships. From the asteroid belt, thousands of automated drones activated, swarming the edges of the fleet. Wormhole generators lit up, opening sudden gateways that allowed human cruisers to strike and vanish again. The Dominion fleet was too massive, too slow to react. Their formation broke apart as they scrambled to respond to attacks from every side. "Where are they?" Tarath roared. "Find them! Destroy them!" But the humans were everywhere, and nowhere. The human counterattack Admiral Kuroda's flagship, Indomitable, led the counterattack. Human ships struck with precision, targeting fuel lines, command ships, and carriers. "Focus on their weak points," Kuroda commanded. "Do not waste fire on their strongest shields. Cut off their arms before you strike the heart." Captain Kane's ship, Vigilance Honor, darted through enemy lines, drawing fire and leading Dominion cruisers into traps. His crew fought with grim determination, every shot carrying the weight of survival. Human pilots and small fighters hurled themselves into the battle, striking at engines and weapon ports before pulling away in daring maneuvers. Everywhere the Dominion struggled. They had expected a direct fight. Instead, they faced a storm of unpredictable tactics. Desperation of the Dominion as hours passed. The great fleet began to crumble. Hundreds of Dominion ships were destroyed, Dozens more disabled. Their supply lines were shattered, their carriers burned. Terath could not believe what he saw. His pride turned to rage. They are insects. We are the Dominion. How can this be happening? But his officers no longer shared his confidence. Fear filled their eyes. For every ship they destroyed, 3 more human ambushes cut into their flanks. Even worse, revolts began to spread among the Dominion's conquered allies. Seeing the humans stand against the Empire gave others courage to rise. Reports arrived of uprisings on distant worlds, weakening the Dominion from within. The fall of the flagship. The climax came when the Indomitable and Vigilance Honor cornered the Dominion flagship itself. The once proud ship was massive, bristling with weapons, but it had been damaged, its shields failing, engines sputtering. Target their core, Admiral Kuroda ordered. Human ships poured fire into the flagship. Explosions tore across its hull, flames burning in the void. On the bridge, Terath stood in denial until the very last moment. Impossible, he muttered. We are the Dominion. We cannot fall, but fall they did. The flagship erupted in a blinding explosion, tearing itself apart. The destruction broke what remained of the Dominion fleet. The surviving ships scattered, retreating into the void, their discipline shattered. The ashes of arrogance, the battlefield was littered with debris. Broken Dominion ships drifted, silent and dead. Human vessels floated among them, scarred and battered but still standing. On the bridge of the Indomitable, Admiral Kuroda let out a slow breath. It is done. Captain Kane nodded, though his face was weary. For now, they will come again. But today, we showed them what it means to face humanity. News of the victory spread across the galaxy like wildfire. The Dominion's greatest fleet had been destroyed, not by an ancient empire, not by a vast alliance, but by a young species they had mocked as weak. Other empires trembled. Some cheered in secret. The myth of Dominion invincibility lay in ashes, and at the center of it all stood humanity, scarred but unbroken, their will shining like fire in the darkness. Varric's vindication on the Dominion capital. Silence hung over the council chambers. Survivors of the fleet brought news of defeat, their voices hollow with shame. Ambassador Varric entered slowly, leaning on his staff. His eyes filled with sorrow swept across the fallen lords. I warned you, he said quietly. Your pride has blinded you. You believed yourselves eternal, but the humans have shown you the truth. The chamber was silent. No one dared laugh now. Varric's voice grew stronger. They are not conquerors, but they will not forgive. You have awakened their fury, and they will not stop until they are certain you can never harm them again. His words echoed through the council, heavy with finality. The dawn of a new era in human space. Celebrations filled the colonies. Statues were raised for the fallen. Songs of victory echoed across Earth. Children learned of the battle not as the end, but as the beginning of humanity's place among the stars. The storm had broken the Dominion's pride. And though the war was not yet over, one truth had become clear. Humanity was no longer a species to be dismissed. They were survivors, fighters. And now they were a force that even empires had to fear. The Dominion, once the unchallenged ruler of the galaxy, now stood on the edge of collapse, and the humans, once ignored, were rising higher with every battle. The galaxy was not silent after the fall of the Dominion's great fleet. Instead, it roared with whispers, rumors, and fear. Worlds once loyal to the Dominion questioned their allegiance. Colonies at the edge of its reach broke away, declaring independence. Ancient empires that had long stayed neutral began to watch humanity with new interest. For centuries, the Zorath Dominion had stood unshaken. Now their greatest fleet had been reduced to wreckage orbiting Earth's star. Humanity had done the impossible, and yet humanity knew the war was not over. A shattered empire. On the Dominion capital, chaos filled the halls of power. Once proud lords argued in panic. The loss of their fleet had not only broken their military pride, but also exposed their weakness to their subjects. Uprisings spread across the outer colonies. Rebellions, once crushed easily, now grew bold. Dominion soldiers were recalled from distant wars to keep order at home. The mighty empire was bleeding from within. In the midst of this collapse, Ambassador Varric watched with weary eyes. He had warned them, begged them not to provoke humanity. Now his warning stood proven, carved in fire and ash. When the council demanded solutions, he gave them none. You wanted war, he said bitterly. You laughed at peace. Now you face a storm you cannot control. The humans will not stop because you do not understand them. They fight not for conquest but for survival, and survival makes them stronger than you can imagine. His words left the chamber cold and silent. Humanity's crossroads. Meanwhile, on Earth, the victory celebrations gave way to sober reflection. In the great underground command hall of Geneva, the leaders of humanity gathered once more. Admirals, generals, scientists, and civilian leaders filled the chamber. Holographic maps of the galaxy glowed before them, showing the Dominion shrinking as its colonies broke away. Admiral Kuroda stood at the center. Her voice was calm, steady, but carried weight. We have broken their fleet, she said, but the Dominion still exists. If we leave them alone, they may rise again. If we strike too far, we risk becoming like them, an empire built on ashes. The council debated fiercely. Some called for total war, to bring the Dominion to complete collapse. Others argued for caution, fearing humanity might overextend. At last, Captain Elias Kane, scarred from battles at New Carthage and Earth, spoke. His words carried the voice of soldiers who had bled for survival. We do not need to conquer them, he said, but we cannot allow them to threaten us again. They must understand. If they raise their hands against humanity once more, they will not survive the storm that follows. His words struck deep. And so humanity chose a path not of conquest, but of warning. The journey to the capital, for the first time in history, a human fleet entered Dominion space without fear. The indomitable flagship of Admiral Kuroda led a formation of carriers, cruisers, and escorts. They did not arrive to attack, but to deliver a message. Still, their presence alone carried power. At every world they passed, Dominion outposts stood down. Some even offered quiet salutes. The Empire's will to resist was crumbling. When the human fleet reached the Dominion capital, the sight stunned the galaxy. Never had foreign warships come so close, not in all the Empire's long reign. The sky above the capital city filled with the dark silhouettes of human ships. Their engines glowed like watchful stars. The Council of the Dominion was forced to receive them. The confrontation. In the grand chamber, the rulers of the Dominion sat, their robes heavy but their eyes hollow with fear. Admiral Kuroda and Captain Kane entered side by side, surrounded by human guards. Their uniforms were simple compared to the grandeur of the Dominion's rulers, yet their presence carried undeniable strength. Varric, the old ambassador, was also there. He watched silently, relief in his tired eyes, for he had prayed humanity would choose warning instead of vengeance. Admiral Kuroda stepped forward. Her voice carried across the chamber, steady and commanding. Your empire attacked us. You sought to erase us. You thought humanity weak, but we are still here, and your great fleet is gone. The rulers shifted uncomfortably. None spoke. Kuroda continued, her words sharp as steel. We do not come to conquer your worlds. We do not come to enslave your people, but understand this. If you attack humanity again, if you seek to harm our colonies, our families, our future, we will not stop at your fleets. We will not stop at your armies. We will reduce your empire to ashes. Her voice did not rise. It did not need to. The weight of her words filled the air like thunder. Captain Kane added, We are not like you. We do not seek to rule the stars. But we will fight for every inch of our home. And if you force us, we will fight until nothing remains of those who threaten us. The chamber fell into silence. Not one of the Dominion rulers dared challenge them. Varric speaks. Then slowly, Varric stepped forward. He bowed slightly toward Kuroda and Kane. They speak truth, he said to his own people. I warned you once. You did not listen, but now you have seen with your own eyes. Their will cannot be broken. Their fire cannot be quenched. If you value survival, then do not raise your hand against them again. For the first time in centuries, the rulers of the Dominion lowered their proud heads. The withdrawal, the human fleet did not stay long. Their message had been delivered. Their presence alone was enough to carve fear deep into the Dominion's heart. As the ships withdrew from orbit, billions on the capital world watched in silence. For the first time, the mighty Dominion had been forced to bow without a single shot fired. The message spread across the galaxy. Other empires whispered of the warning. Some trembled, some cheered, some plotted, but all understood one truth. Humanity was no longer a forgotten species. A new dawn back on Earth. Children learned of the war as the story of survival and strength. Statues rose not to celebrate conquest, but to honor those who stood against the storm. Captain Kane returned to his home colony for the first time in years. He stood beneath the stars, scarred but alive, watching the night sky. His heart was heavy with loss, yet proud of what humanity had achieved. Admiral Kuroda continued her service, shaping the fleet into a shield for the future. Her name became legend among the stars, and Varric, the alien who had warned them, lived his final days knowing his words had at last been heard. Among humans, he was remembered not as an enemy, but as a friend who tried to bridge the gap between worlds. The final warning generations later, scholars and leaders would still recall the words spoken in the Dominion's Grand Chamber. Do not attack the humans. They will never yield. They will never forget, and if forced, they will reduce your empire to ashes. It became more than a warning. It became a law of survival, whispered across the galaxy whenever arrogant empires considered testing humanity again. Humanity, once overlooked, now stood as a guardian among the stars. Not an empire of conquest, but a people who had proven that even the smallest flame could blaze into a fire no darkness could contain. The age of human fragility had ended. The age of human resolve had begun,